We are live, Leader.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone to today's Executive Committee, Tuesday, the 11th of August 2026. Before we start, of course, I will read out the script of the recording of the meeting, and it goes as follows. Members and all attendees are advised that the public business in this meeting is being live streamed for public view and also recorded. By participating in the meeting, attendees give consent for this. The recording will be available through the link to the event live stream on the Council website for public viewing for 180 days afterwards. The recording will be automatically deleted after this time. You're all reminded that the Council does not allow any other recording of the meeting than this one. Thank you very much. So now we move on to the agenda on today's Executive Committee, and item number 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We do indeed. We have apologies from Councillors Cochrane, Cox and Weatherston, Leader.
Thank you very much. So item number 2 is order of business. I don't intend to change the order of business, so it will stay as it is. And item number 3 is declarations of interest. Remind members to declare any interest now or at the time and give a short statement of why you're declaring an interest. And currently there are nobody declaring, so we shall move on to item number 4, which is minute, which you'll find on pages 3 to 10. Consider minute of the meeting held on the 9th of June 2026. Members agree that minute? Got some agreement in the room. Thank you very much. So that now moves on to item number 5, the monitoring of the Capital Financial Plan 2026-27, which you'll find on pages 11 to 42. Consider a report by the Director of Finance, which is Susie Douglas. Susie.
Thank you. Morning, members. The 3 finance papers in your pack today give a forecast of the Council's financial position at 31st of March 2027 based on the first quarter's activity at the 30th of June. The first report in your pack relates to the capital budget and shows that based on the first quarter of 26-27, the Council is projecting an outturn of 111.3 million against a budget of 120.3, giving a net budget variance of 9 million. This reflects new funding of 4.4 million and a net profiling of 13.5 million from 26-27 into future years. Timing movements from 26-27 into future years include Borders Innovation Park and New Hoyk High School, partly offset by the acceleration of funding from future years into 26-27 for plant and vehicle replacement. Pressures in new schools budgets, which were highlighted as part of the 25-26 outturn reporting and firmed up as part of this monitoring, have created an in-year pressure of 5.6 million. This report proposes that available budget of 900,000 from emergency and unplanned is used to partially offset this pressure, with further work to be undertaken during quarter 2 to explore funding opportunities for the remaining 4.7 million. The 26-27 financial plan approved borrowing of £64 million, largely to support construction at the new high school in Hoyk and the new care village at Tweed Bank. A timing movement for part of the borrowing is being requested into future years to align with the current programme of works. Following this, the capital borrowing requirement for 26-27 reduces to 56.3 million. As you're all familiar with, the latest version of the SIPFA Prudential Code requires quarterly monitoring of prudential indicators by councils to ensure transparency of council borrowing. The first monitoring for 26-27 is shown at Appendix 5, providing an updated position on key Treasury indicators as at the 30th of June 26. Apologies, this appendix was issued slightly later than the rest of the papers that's shown in modern.gov as a supplementary paper. And the information provided is a snapshot at the end of quarter 1, and there are no concerns to highlight at this point in the year. The capital appendices have been reviewed at this first monitoring of 26-27, with changes made to improve transparency and clarity around the approvals for environment requested, better align the tables for those presented for revenue, and to align with the system improvements being made within Business World. A new appendix, Appendix 4, has been included, which details all the environments requested as part of the capital monitoring report to members, splitting the request to those relating to timing movements and those which change the overall project budget. Sections 4.2 to 4.5 of the report include a description of what information is included within each appendix, which you'll hopefully find useful. Section 5 of the report includes key highlights and also shows in the table at 5.2 movements in emergency plan budget during 26-27, confirming that budget is now fully utilised. Moving back to recommendations, at 2.1 of the report, we're seeking approval today of recommendations A to E. Happy to take any questions, and Mr. Curry is also here.
Thank you very much, Susie. So, but first we've got the Executive Member, Councillor Lee Douglas-Lee.
We can't hear Lee.
Aha. Can you hear me now? Jenny, can you hear me? Yep. Apologies for that. I needed John's strength to push in the mic. So from the top again, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Susie, and indeed thank you all the teams across the whole of the Council for all their continued hard work in this area. The report demonstrates the scale of our continued investment across the borders, but also the importance of maintaining a capital programme that is realistic, deliverable, and responsive to the changing circumstances. As Susie said, the projected programme for this year is now 111.3 million against a revised budget of 120.3 million. But much of that movement relates to timing rather than any reduction in our ambition. Funding is being reprofiled into future years for Hawick High School and the Border Innovation Park, reflecting when that expenditure is now expected to take place. But very importantly, the anticipated completion date for Hawick High School remains unchanged, with the foundations complete and the steel frame now taking shape. At the same time, 1.5 million is being brought forward to accelerate investment in our plant and our vehicle fleet. And this is a particularly positive example of capital investment supporting better services today, while helping to reduce our reliance on more expensive external hire in the future. We've secured 4.4 million of additional external funding for projects. That includes flood resilience, active travel, road safety, energy efficiency, timber transport and play facilities. And that is significant funding being attracted into the borders and converted into practical improvements for our communities. Now, with my local councillor hat on, I'll take a moment to home in on Selkirkshire. The proposals include a new puffin crossing and traffic calming measures in Selkirk, £50,000 for the Glenburn surface water scheme at Newtown, St Boswells, and there's energy efficiency improvements at Liliesleaf Primary School and the Newtown Depot. Now, these may sit alongside much larger projects within the programme, but they're precisely the kind of visible, practical investments residents notice and they value. We must also be open about the 5.6 million pressure that's been identified. That's partly due to asbestos removal from the former Galashiels Academy and Peebles High School buildings. Around 900,000 of the funding has already been identified, but a further 4.7 million solution is still required. And this is substantial pressure, so focus must, and I know it will continue, around gathering as many underspends as we can throughout the year. As we approach Q3, we should be mindful that we may need to include some additional funding in the 27-28 budget, but we're not there yet, and I have every faith in the management teams that we will continue to do all we can to minimise this potential situation. I'll now turn to the structure and the format of the papers themselves, and I particularly welcome the work that has been undertaken to restructure the capital appendices, bringing greater consistency to how the capital and the revenue information is presented, makes these substantial and sometimes complex reports easier for members and, most importantly, members of the public to follow. The new dedicated capital environments appendix is especially helpful. It brings together all the budget changes for which approval is being sought and distinguishes between timing movements across financial years and changes affecting the overall project budget. And this makes it much clearer as to what has changed, why has it changed, and precisely what we are being asked to approve. It is a worthwhile improvement in transparency, consistency and accountability. So this remains an ambitious programme, delivering schools, care facilities, infrastructure, energy improvements and visible investment across the borders. And our responsibility is to maintain that ambition whilst ensuring the programme remains affordable, transparent and achievable. So to sum up, I am extremely happy to support today's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Thank you for that. So we're just going to open up now to questions and comments. Do you have any questions or comments on this paper, members? Councillor Perrone, Julie.
Thank you very much, Leader. It's just a point of clarification, particularly on in the appendix around Eyemouth Primary School. There's a note in that paper that says, and we all know this, that the 8.3 million for this year will not be spent in this year. And I want some clarity and understanding that that money will be held over into 27-28. There is 6 million in that year in the columns. That money will be untouched and not moved anywhere else, please.
Yeah, as part of this process, that budget will transfer into 728, and that, in line with the rest of the capital plan, will be part of the 27-28 financial planning process. So that budget will move forward. It's in that line intended for that purpose, and it will be wrapped up in the overall financial planning process for 27-28.
Okay, thanks very much, Susie.
Councillor Mountford Simon.
Yeah, just a quick query. In Appendix 1, there's a reference to drainage in Kelso, and I'm just wondering what that applies to.
We don't actually have that details to hand, Councillor Mountford, but I'll find out and come back and report to you and colleagues, ward members, just on what that works are.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Thompson and Councillor Hamilton. Viv.
Thank you. It's just to get a reassurance as well around under the flood and coastal protection section. It mentions at the bottom in the note about the West Linton bank erosion works to be carried out for that. And it's that if we miss the SEPA deadline again this year, can we get the guarantee that the monies will be rolled over? We're given 7,000 out of our small schemes towards that, and we've got match funding from officers for the other 7. And I just want to make sure, this is the 3rd year we've tried to get this over the line, and the bank is in serious danger, so we really need the work done, but the window for SEPA is closing and I'm not sure we've got the licence yet. So can I get assurance that that money will roll over if for any reason we're late again?
I'll pick up with the project team and get a sit rep on where that project is and what the status is, and make sure that we do all we can to avoid losing that funding.
Councillor Hamilton, Carol.
Yeah, thanks. Susie, 8.3 million for the Eyemouth school, primary school. We started off with 16, I think, didn't we? Seems to have gone down. Is that minus the family centre in there?
Sorry, Councillor Hamilton, I'm just trying to find the right line on the...
Well, Mr. Douglas does that. Just to pick up on that detail, I think that relates to timing movements in years. So I think we were originally forecasting to spend 8.3 this year. That's not going to happen. And so there's projected spend in future years, Councillor Hamilton. So I think what we're talking about there is the 8.3 not being all spent this year and being moved into future years, but the overall remaining budget falls into future years.
Yeah, so there's 8.3 that is carrying forward. So you can see that on page 23 of the pack, plus 6 million that we've already got in 27-28. So we'll end up with 14.3 million in 27-28. So there's not been any budget removed from this project. It's just a case of over a number of years that phasing and time and movement moving into the year that we're now expecting that the activity could take place. We've spent 1.7 million already in the programme on a range of kind of facilitating work, but nothing, as you're aware, is actually taking place in terms of construction yet.
Great. Thanks, Susie.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Robson. Ewan.
Thanks, Leader. Can I please ask about timber traffic and the support for the 3 roads in the appendix that are mentioned? Seemingly there was 900,000 came from Scottish Forestry, but that it was only match funding, whereas the sort of general press releases tended to suggest that it was full funding. Can I just ask, what is the position with regard to those 3 roads? Will the funding enable the full repairs to go ahead on those 3 roads? And in general, are we able to attract funding from forestry interests where they clear fell areas which have come to maturity, and we can put the money into restoring the roads that are damaged? Can we do we attract a lot of funding as a result of that? What is the position regarding the total damage? Do we have an assessment of that over the course of a financial year from these schemes?
Well, in terms of the funding that we've managed to be successful for SSTS this year, that's exactly in line with what the request was, Councillor Robson, where we submit bids and there's a 50-50 match funding requirement, so that will enable us to deliver the works that was planned on those roads listed. In terms of attracting additional funding to other areas, the SSTS funding is we were unsuccessful in any funding last year, so we kind of reset the balance this year and managed to achieve substantially more funding this year. That fund is one that's under significant pressure across and significant competition across Scotland, just given the amount of forestry works underway across rural areas. So whether we can achieve more funding in future years remains to be seen, but we'll do our best to try and achieve that. Our roads officers are regularly out on the network undertaking inspections to understand the scale and nature of damage on our road network, just through normal wear and tear, but also we do pay particular attention to those areas where are heavily trafficked by timber transport, and that forms part of the rationale that informs our bids for funding through that scheme.
Mr. Mountford, do you want to come back?
Yeah, thanks for letting me come back again, Chair. Question really for John. Where are we up to with the new building in Tweedbank? I can see that it's nearly finished, but that presumably is fitting it out now, and have we got tenants organised?
So the building is complete, practically complete. It's a shell and core fit out, that building. So we build the shell and core exactly the same way we did with Borders Innovation Park 1. So that means that any tenant that comes in would be responsible for their own fit out. Although we will look to see what we can do to help incentivise that through tenancies. So it's fully complete, the building. The only thing outstanding is the completion certificate through building standards, and we're working with officers in that and just closing that particular point out. We are currently marketing the unit. I think we have 6 active inquiries for that space. So, and we've got more interest than this space available. So we're just going through that piece of work with DM Hall to shortlist and identify potential tenants, and then we'll be working with them through agreeing heads of terms with them. So we're hoping to have tenancies agreed by Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of a success story because it's on time and on budget.
Ahead of time and under budget.
Right. Brilliant. That's what I love to hear.
And I'm sure the press are writing that down. Right?
I think it's the only time I've been able to say that in my whole career, but yeah, it's a good success story, that project.
Excellent. Thank you. So members, I don't see any other hands up, so we're happy and content with the recommendations to accept. Great. Thank you very much. So that now moves us to item number 6, monitoring of the General Fund Revenue Budget 26-27. Consider a report by the Director of Finance, which is Susie Douglas. Susie.
Thank you. So for the second report in your pack is the revenue position for 26 at the end of quarter 1. Forecasts have been completed for the first quarter of 26-27, and despite a strengthened approach to financial management, unfunded pressures of £2 million are forecast at the financial year, which will require mitigating actions to balance the budget. The most significant pressures are within education and children's services in relation to out-of-area placements for children and young people. That pressure amounts to around £2.4 million. And within adult services in relation to joint learning disability and adult social care, which amounts to around £400,000. Within out-of-area placements, additional children and young people have required placements since the financial plan was agreed. Within adults, the pressures have arisen within joint learning disability due to increased client package costs and increased staff costs within care homes. As part of strengthened financial management arrangements for 26-27, services prepared spend plans ahead of the start of the financial year, focusing on permanently delivering savings wherever possible. This has supported infrastructure and environment, corporate governance and people performance and change in forecasting underspends at Q1. The spend plan process has also supported early progress in the permanent delivery of financial plan savings, with almost 3/4 of the 26-27 savings currently delivered now on a permanent basis. Finance induction training was launched during Q1 and is now available to staff, and detailed access to the financial dashboard within Business World will be rolled out from Q2. In response to the remaining budget pressure, the Council Management Team is continuing to review service spend plans and projected outturn in detail. This will include a particular focus on identifying activity which can be stopped, reduced or deferred until 27-28, alongside opportunities to increase income where appropriate. This work will be undertaken ahead of Q2 reporting to maximise the impact of any management action and support the Council in moving towards a balanced year-end position as early. Financial plan savings of £12.9 million are required to be delivered in 26-27. An analysis of deliverability is included within Appendix 2, which shows a significant improvement on last year, and I do really want to reinforce the significant work undertaken over the whole Council in this regard, and that can be clearly seen in the table at 3.6 of the report. Following the June 2026 month end, £9.4 million of savings, that's 73% of the total required, have been delivered permanently. Another 600,000, which is 4%, have been delivered on a temporary basis through alternative means, and 2.9 million, which is the remaining 23%, are profiled to be delivered by the end of March next year. And if you just look at the graph on or the table table at section 3.6, it's really quite clear that the first column on each of those coloured bars shows the position that we're currently reporting for 26-27, with the second bar showing where we were at this same time last year. So, for example, in Q1 of this financial year, we're seeing that we've delivered £9.4 million of savings, which, as I said, is almost 3/4 of those required, whereas last year at this same point, we were delivering only £2.7 million on a permanent basis. And you can see that each of those categories is showing an improved position for 26-27. So just reinforcing that really significant work that's been undertaken across the whole Council, putting us in a really good position from a financial sustainability perspective. A high-level summary of the monitoring position at Q1 in each service is detailed from section 3.9 of the report. As I covered within the capital report previously, we've also reviewed the appendices used within the revenue reports, and as a result, the environment reports have been redesigned to simplify how information is provided and to align the presentation of information across both those monitoring reports. The new report can be found at Appendix 3 and merges all environments. So just to be clear, when we refer to environments, we're referring to movements in budget for which approval is requested into a single document. The figures in the appendix have also been changed to be presented in round thousands to align with other appendices. Moving back to the recommendations in 2.1, we're seeking approval today for recommendations A to E, and I'm happy.
Thank you very much again, Susie. So now open up, but first to the executive member, Councillor Douglas-Lee.
Thank you again, Chair, and again, thank you, Susie and the team. There's no attempt in this report to disguise the challenge before us. At the end of Q1, we are forecasting an unfunded pressure of 2.8 million, and that is significant. And our focus must be on bringing the position back towards balance without taking indiscriminate decisions that could undermine essential services. However, there is also strong signs that the financial discipline introduced this year is making a difference. And indeed, our director has pointed that out, in great detail. These spend plans were prepared before the start of the financial year, giving services and members a clearer understanding of anticipated expenditure and allowing pressures to be identified and addressed much earlier. I'm not going to apologise for highlighting, the great work that's came as a result of that, as our director's already pointed out. But it's the delivery of the savings programme. Of that 12.9 million required this year, we have already had a permanent saving of 9.4 million, 73%. A further 600,000 has been achieved temporarily, with plans in place for the remainder. And that is a substantial improvement on the position, as the chart shows as well. And it does demonstrate the value of the detailed planning, early intervention and clear accountability that has been mobilised strongly this year. But nevertheless, success has been mixed across services and significant pressures do remain. The largest is within education and children's services, where out-of-area placements are forecast to overspend by 2.4 million. 7 additional placements have been required since the original budget analysis, creating an estimated additional cost of 1.8 million if those placements remain for the full year. But we should always seek to develop the right local provision wherever we can safely and appropriately meet that child's needs. That can deliver better outcomes for the children, the families, as well as greater financial sustainability. However, we should never forget that behind every figure is an individual child or a young person, so getting it right for every child must spearhead our decisions. Financial control is essential, but the financial pressure must never determine whether a child receives the care, education or support they genuinely need. And our responsibility is to deliver the right support and then address collectively and sustainably how we are going to meet that demand, how we fund it. There's also pressures within adult services, including additional learning disability care packages and wider social care costs. Again, they're not simply numbers to be reduced. They represent real people with assessed needs. Management action must therefore be targeted and intelligent, as I know it always is, examining what can genuinely be stopped, reduced, deferred, or delivered differently, whilst protecting this essential provision. The report also records financial implications of the fire at Newtown Primary School. They're still being assessed and any costs will return to the executive, but the immediate priority must remain ensuring the right educational and nursery arrangements are in place for every affected child and family. Again, I welcome the redesign of the Revenue Environments Appendix. All the budget changes for which approval is being sought are now brought together in one document rather than being presented separately, and that format is more closely aligned with the capital report. This makes it easier to see whether a movement is temporary or permanent, its impact in the current and future financial years, and the reason it is required. And this all matters because we're not simply being informed of these movements, we are being asked to approve them. Members and the public should be able to understand clearly what is changing and why. So this is a worthwhile improvement again in transparency, consistency and accessibility. So the overall position remains challenging. There is no room for complacency. However, the early delivery of these permanent savings, improved spend planning and early identification of pressures gives us a strong foundation from where we can grow and move forward. And again, I'm very happy to support the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Douglas. So open up for the members for questions and comments. And first, I have Councillor Mountford. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Susie, for this report. I just really want to add my praise to Councillor Douglas's for the savings that have been achieved so far this year. I mean, I've been on this executive for a few years, and this is the first time I think I can remember such an achievement. Normally, we're struggling in the first quarter, and this time we're certainly way ahead of where we would have expected to be, and I think it's down to the hard work that's gone in, and also the new disciplines that have been introduced. So, congratulations and thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mount, for those words. Any other questions or comments on this item? I don't see any other hands or questions, so members happy to agree with the recommendations. Great, excellent. Thank you very much. So that moves us on to item number 7, which is balances at the 31st of March 2027. I've got the consider report by the Director of Finance, Ms. Susie Douglas again. Susie.
Thank you. So the final report completing the financial position for Q1 26-27 is the balances report. The Council's General Fund Usable Reserve, which is the non-earmarked balance, was 7.56 million at 31st of March 26. The level of reserves remaining at year-end is predicated on the year-end revenue position. I've just reported an unfunded pressure of 2.8 million. If the revenue budget is not balanced by 31st of March, this would have a direct impact on council reserves through the requirement to use the general fund balance to bridge any year-end funding gap. The total of all usable balances, excluding development contributions at 31st of March 27, is projected to be 39.749 million, as summarised in section 4.2 of the report. Section 4.3 of the report details the movement in the general fund balance in the first quarter. Detailing the earmarked balances, including DSM balances, have been released into 26-27 as planned, also noting movements within specific funds in Q1. The table in 4.4 of the report shows the movements in allocated balances in the first quarter of the year. The balance was increased through additional funding being received for the Extended Producer Responsibility Scheme, which is a waste funding stream, and the remaining movements in this table reflect planned drawdowns from the Change Fund. Moving back to the recommendations at 2.1, it's recommended that the Executive Committee approves recommendations A to C. Take any questions.
Thank you very much, Susie. So open up again to members, but first to Executive Member, Councillor Douglas Lee.
It's like an echo. Again, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Susie and the team. This report demonstrates that the Council continues to have financial resilience, and it also reinforces why that resilience must be protected and used with care. The unallocated general fund reserve is projected to remain at 7.56 million, and that represents 1.8% of our net revenue expenditure, and it would cover around 39% of the risks identified in the Corporate Financial Risk Register if they were all to materialise. That provides an important safeguard, but it is not an unlimited one. The 2.8 million pressure identified in the revenue report illustrates why we must continue working to return recurring expenditure to balance rather than relying on reserves to bridge the gap. Total usable balances, excluding development contributions, are projected to reduce from 43.5 million to 39.7 million by March 2027. They're predominantly planned movements, with earmarked funds being applied for the purposes for which they were established. The Change Fund is supporting our additional investment in Live Borders, building energy management systems, property rationalisation, and the technology required to support service transformation. These are appropriate uses of reserves where they help to modernise services, improve efficiency, or reduce future costs. The strategic distinction is important. Earmarked reserves should be used purposefully to support agreed investment and transformation. The unallocated reserve must remain available to protect the Council and its services against genuine risks and unforeseen events. So reserves give us resilience and the breathing space to manage change, but they are not a substitute for sustainable budgets. They can support transformation and planned investment. They cannot fund reoccurring overspends indefinitely. The position remains stable and the core general fund reserve remains intact. However, the pressures identified across today's report mean we must continue to make disciplined decisions, ensuring every use of balances contributes either to resilience, necessary investment, or a more sustainable Council for the future. But in summary, I'm very happy to support today's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Douglas. So open it up now for questions or comments. Any questions or comments on this report? No? Nothing at all. So members happy to agree with the recommendations then? So thank you very much. Thank you, Susie and Councillor Douglas. So now move on to item number 8, which is Scottish Borders Housing Emergency Action Plan progress, which you'll find on pages 87 to 100. Consider a report by the Director of Corporate Governance, to Ms Nuala McKinlay. Nuala.
Thanks, Leader. I won't take much of your time, but just to put this in context, members, on the 30th of May 2024, this council, Scottish Borders Council, declared a housing emergency. Just about a year after that, in April 2025, this council agreed the action plan, which is before you today. And since that time, a considerable amount of work has been done. And this report today is the first of what will be an annual report, advising you of the progress that has been made. Members, you will see from the action plan and from the appendix a considerable amount of work is ongoing. A number of actions have been completed and a large number are ongoing. And that's your officers across the council and our partners. The Strategic Housing Forum is now well established and is operating effectively as a programme board in respect of this matter, but you will, in the executive, have an annual report on update. I'll hand over now to Sharon Elston, who's online. Leader.
Thank you, Nuala, for that great introduction there, and thank you, members, for having me along today. So, as Nuala has detailed, I am here to give you an update on progress in delivering the Housing Emergency Action Plan since its approval in April 2025 and seek your endorsement of the progress achieved to date. We've made steady, consistent progress across the Housing Emergency Action Plan, and I hope members have the chance to study and look into detail within the action plan supplied within the papers today. There is significant partnership activity underway to increase housing supply and improve housing access and homelessness options. 22% of the actions have been formally completed, with 75% actively progressing. The greatest challenge remains homelessness pressures and the lack of suitable move-on accommodation. So to provide the strategic context, we have in this area declared a housing emergency. We are now 2 years into that declaration. We have in the interim period between the declaration and April 2025 drafted and had approved the Housing Emergency Action Plan. We have the Strategic Housing Forum, which is acting as the Housing Emergency Programme Board, and the action plan aligns with the Local Housing Strategy 2023 to 2028. So overall progress is being made in 51 actions across 2 clear themes. We have 11 of those actions complete. We have 38 of those actions ongoing, and we have 2 that haven't started yet. And you can see from the action plan what those 2 are, and we will be aiming to make progress on those within this financial year. So theme 1, which is increasing housing supply, we have 8 completed, 23 ongoing and the 2 not started yet. Under theme 2, which is housing access and homelessness prevention, we have 3 completed and 15 ongoing. So in terms of the key achievements within the housing supply theme, we have the Tweedbank Lowood development, which is the progression of plans for 400 to 550 mixed tenure homes. We've got the governance and procurement arrangements established. We have included this development within the Strategic Housing Investment Plan and the Housing Infrastructure Fund discussions, and we target progress to planning consent by March 2027. We've also got the Regional Housing Collaboration, and that encompasses the South of Scotland Housing Prospectus, which was launched last year. We've got research on key worker housing completed. We have a house builder growth campaign underway, and we have increasing developer interest in the south of Scotland reported through our RSL partners. We have our Empty Homes programme, and the grant scheme has been extended until 2028. We have a £700,000 investment secured for that work, and we've now got 2 Empty Homes officers in post. We've got community-led housing, and through Second Homes Council Tax, we've funded 4 local housing needs assessments within Stow, Newcastleton, the Berwickshire area and West Linton. And we're also providing support to Stow Community Trust. And we have rural housing projects now reflected in the Strategic Housing Investment Plan priorities. And we are supporting small-scale developments to access the rural housing funding from Scottish Government. We've got worker legacy housing in terms of active ongoing discussions with our RSL partners and Scottish Futures Trust in terms of legacy housing where there are large infrastructure projects. We've also got potential opportunities linked to the major infrastructure development with Centre Parks, and we are in discussions with Centre Parks and construction companies around the housing requirements for the workforce there. In terms of theme 2, homelessness and housing access, we are aware of continuing pressure and significant challenges within the homelessness service. The key issues include persistent pressure on temporary accommodation, limited movement into permanent housing. We've got low turnover and low void rates across the permanent housing stock within our RSL properties, increased use of hotels and B&B accommodation, and growing budget pressures within the homelessness service. However, we also have some positive developments. We have the Homelessness and Health Strategic Partnership re-established. That is meeting quarterly. We have the Multi-Agency Prevention of Homelessness panel under development. We've got a hoarding and property condition pilot delivering positive outcomes in terms of sustainability of tenancies for people affected by those issues. And we've got private sector access funding operational, where we can facilitate access to a private tenancy for homeless applicants. And so far we have had 19 clients engaged with that funding. We have 16 receiving support, and we have 3 households who have secured private tenancies. We have challenges, and there are risks, and failure to deliver measurable progress following declaration of the housing emergency is considered a reputational risk for the council. However, we have market forces at play that are out with our control in terms of national funding uncertainty, market conditions affecting delivery of new development. We've got capacity constraints across the development sector and the house building sector, and we have continued dependence as a stock transfer authority on partner organisations to drive that development. In terms of homelessness challenges, as I've mentioned, we have the demand continuing to exceed available housing supply. Temporary accommodation pressures remain high. The risk of increased expenditure on unsuitable accommodation, and potential regulatory concerns if pressures continue to escalate. So the next steps in terms of the Housing Emergency Action Plan, we have current work underway to reframe the actions around the key strategic priorities. We will introduce clearer high-level actions and sub-actions. We have, obviously, this is the first draft of the Housing Emergency Action Plan, and we're just over a year into that. So we will strip out some of the completed actions and retire those and introduce new priority activity. And we will strengthen the programme management and performance monitoring, again through the Strategic Housing Forum, of which we have another meeting planned for early November. We will also develop stronger communications of our achievements, increasing public understanding of housing investment benefits, and demonstrate the economic and community impacts. The Strategic Housing Forum will continue to oversee the delivery. That is all I have in terms of an update today, and I'm more than happy to take any questions or any queries that anyone may have on this.
Thank you very much, Sharon. So members are going to open up, but first I go to the executive member. It's Carol Hamilton. Carol.
Yes,
Thank you, Sharon, and apologies I'm not in chamber today. From this clear and concise report and action plan, I think it's obvious that this council is not sitting on its laurels when it comes to the housing emergency. And I'd like to thank all the RSLs and officers who work tirelessly to help this council combat the homeless situation and housing emergency that we find ourselves in within our communities here in the Borders. There are teams behind teams all working together, and I, along, I'm sure, with my fellow executives, thank you all. Some would say that we have an ambitious action plan, and I say yes, and that's to be applauded. And this council recognises what needs to be done, and this plan shows how we are going to do it, and also what we have already done. I'd like the committee to note that these actions that have been delivered, but also have confidence, like myself, that those in progress are working their way to green as we speak. Having discussed with officers, I am unconcerned about those not started. Both of these require a substantial amount of research and work involving stakeholders, and I am reassured by the officers of this council that this work is being undertaken in the background. So I ask you to accept the recommendation on this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hamilton. Thank you. So members, I open this up for questions or comments and wish to comment on this paper. Councillor Hamilton Scott online and Councillor Browning. Councillor Hamilton Scott.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader, and thank you to the officers for presenting that report. It's very welcome to have that. I suppose I have some level of concern about this moving forward. Obviously, there's a great number of work and action points which have been undertaken, which is to be applauded. But obviously, we are facing a kind of national situation, particularly with the MERS, in terms of housing of asylum seekers. And obviously this region is having to play its part in that. So I'm wondering what impact that programme is having on yours, on your work, and is there any engagement with the MERS company regarding kind of future plans and engagement regarding our own needs, as well as meeting that of the national government?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hamilton. That is a very valid point, and it is undoubtedly having an impact in terms of certain areas within the Borders where mayors are procuring properties. We know that Hawick is one of those high areas, and they have procured a number of properties within that town up to date. The engagement with mayors doesn't sit within my own service, it sits within Safer Communities. However, I know that officers are engaged with mayors. There are regular communications with officers within MERS. However, there is limited impact that we can make as a council in terms of steering MERS in a certain direction. However, it is something I can feed back to the officers that are directly involved in the communications there, because you know, the activity, we have seen an increase in activity by MERS over the last year, and undoubtedly it is any impact on properties being taken out of general circulation will have an impact.
Thank you, that's much appreciated. And I wonder, perhaps, I don't know if the leader might want to reflect on more actions the council could be taking in general to engage with MERS in a probably a more constructive way than what we currently are receiving at this point, and whether the executive might, as a committee, look to, I suppose, enforce maybe what our own priorities are and not necessarily what that is of the government.
Yes, Councillor Hamilton, thank you. That's a very valid point, and I'm happy to take that forward and potentially either draft a letter or look at different ways. But I think we also maybe need a briefing on this just to see where we are and what is happening on that piece, because I'm not too aware at the moment. David?
Yeah, I think that there is regular engagement with MERS through the Safer Communities team led by Graham Jones. Members very happy to bring back a briefing on that, if that would be helpful. I see Jenny just put her hand up, and Perhaps Jenny could provide a bit more detail for members on that, Leader.
Yeah, it's just to say that we're actually planning a members' brief on exactly this topic, so I can confirm when we're scheduling that, and obviously that'll be an opportunity to provide more information and to obviously speak to Mears Direct as well, as we have done previously in a previous briefing as well. So just to provide some further detail on it, hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Jenny. That's helpful clarity there. We've got Councillor Perrone, Julie.
Thanks very much, Leader. I have a question around 1.13 of the action plan, which says work with SME householders to better understand the challenges they face with the planning system and other barriers to development. That is welcome because we obviously cannot build houses on our own. I'd also like to know there are bigger developers in the housing market. Many of them are working in Midlothian, and I note that there is nothing on them in the action plan, although because they're bigger than SMEs, they're classed as large businesses. What work have we undertaken there? And perhaps you could outline, Sharon, what work you have been doing with the SMEs. I understood that we were intending to have some kind of session with them at some point in this term, and I wondered if you could maybe give us all an update on that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Perrone. It's a valid point, and unfortunately we have seen some SME builders go under into administration due to cash flow issues over the last 2 years or so since we declared a housing emergency. So that landscape is really challenging at the moment. We do have plans to engage with the construction sector in terms of not only the Centre Parks development, but also to get them on board to the Strategic Housing Forum. And myself and Councillor Hamilton are looking to engage with McTaggart's in terms of their land bank in the borders and also what their plans are for development. Within the borders over the last 5 years or so, we haven't seen the private development that we do see in the Central Belt, etc. So it is something that we are keen to increase and engage with developers on, and we're at the early stages of that. But I think one of the key actions for us is to get them more engaged into the Strategic Housing Forum to come along and give us an idea of what their plans are for development in this area. So that is an action that will be expanded and taken forward in the refreshed action plan.
Excellent, and I think it would be important that members are aware of what actions come out of that and what work has been ongoing, because I'm conscious they're missing from the forum that you're talking about, and the sooner we get them involved in that, the better. So thank you for that work.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Mountford, Simon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sharon, for that report. I mean, it's really encouraging to see the degree of partnership working that's going on, because obviously we can't solve the problem ourselves. There is an emergency. The fact that we demand way outstrips supply demonstrates that the emergency isn't getting any less. So the initiatives that have been detailed in this report are really encouraging. There's just one suggestion that I've got. One of the issues that come before me regularly is the amount of holiday lets and Airbnbs that are taking over some of the villages in the borders and actually hollowing out communities because they're taking away homes that would otherwise be available for residential accommodation, permanent residential accommodation. And obviously, holiday lets form an important part of the economic development of the borders and part of our economy. But I was wondering if there could be work done to decide what the optimum balance is between holiday lets and residential accommodation. Should there be 25%, 30%? I don't know, but maybe there's some work that could go on there, because at the moment, a lot of villagers are coming to me and saying, look, our homes are disappearing into holiday lets, and that affects children in schools. It affects all kinds of other things. Thank you.
Certainly that's an area which has been actively kept under review and actively reported to the Strategic Housing Forum. At the last Strategic Housing Forum, there was a paper taken to the members of that group around the current balance between short-term let accommodation and houses. The view that the forum reached at that point, that we've not reached a tipping point where we should be considering using planning controls to create say areas, because as you know, Councillor Mountford, if we reach a tipping point, there are things that we can do. I should say that as a balance between economic development and housing, but I can absolutely reassure you that that work is actively ongoing constantly.
Thank you, Nuala. That's encouraging. It'd be worth perhaps having a wider debate on what that tipping point is.
I mean, we can, if you find it helpful, I'm sure we can bring you a paper or a briefing on that to allow you to engage in that conversation. But of course, that's really what the Housing Forum's for, unless you want to step more into that space.
Maybe to APWG sometime, I don't know. Thank you.
Happy to do that.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Robson. Ewan.
Thanks. Can I just ask whether the Housing Forum is able to make representations to the government about the cost of infrastructure on small scale rural, not only rural, urban sites as well, where the cost of infrastructure is such that the sites are never developed. It can prove to be particularly helpful in say, small villages or derelict sites in urban areas, but the development and redevelopment never takes place because the sheer cost per house or per flat or whatever is too great. Can the forum perhaps take this issue up with the Scottish Government and ask whether there may be some way of reducing infrastructure costs in these sorts of situations, because they could, if these sites were redeveloped, make a considerable contribution towards the housing emergency targets that we've got in place.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you, Councillor Robson. That's a very valid point. And you will see from the action plan at 1.14, we are engaged with the Scottish Government in terms of the establishment of the new National Housing Agency, More Homes Scotland, and that is to focus on land acquisition, preparing sites for development and enabling infrastructure to unlock stalled housing projects. So that is very much at the forefront of the discussions with that new agency. The new agency isn't operational yet. There's work going on in the background, but officers have been involved in conversations around the setup and the remit of that agency, and that is very much at the forefront in terms of unlocking stalled sites and looking particularly in rural areas to unlocking the barriers to perhaps smaller sites and making those viable again, because the costs at the moment are astronomical, as you say, and are a direct barrier to smaller SMEs coming down to this area because it's not commercially viable for them. So that very much is a conversation that is happening and will continue to happen.
Would it be possible to have sight of the ministerial letter where some of these issues were discussed as relates to SMEs? It's mentioned in the report. So I don't have the reference in front of me. I'll send you an email later.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
We've got Councillor Greenwell. John.
I won't take up any time. My question was around 1.14 and it's just been answered. Thank you.
And thank you, John. So any other questions or comments on this? Members happy to agree the recommendation? I've got agreement in the room there. Thank you very much for that report there. So now we move on to item number 9. Is any other items previously circulated? There are no other items previously circulated. So move on to item number 10. Any other items which the chairman decides are urgent? There are no items which the chairman decides are urgent. So we'll now end today's meeting. Thank you very much. We'll just wait till we go offline, but thank you those watching online for joining.